While Europe is still suffering from economic problems, ASEAN countries, on the other hand, face a brighter future. Between 2012 and 2016, these economies are expected to expand by 10% per year, double the rate of the global economy, mainly due to increasing domestic demand rather than exports, as the population in the region becomes increasingly wealthier. The region's remarkable expansion of the middle class has boosted spending on education and health, as well as vehicles and household appliances. Thus, trade in the region consists of more import than export, with Indonesia and the Philippines leading on the GDP annual growth rate. Having a large population can somewhat cushion the blow from reduced global demand. However, this will not be sustainable without the necessary economic growth.
With 2015, objectively, there's a lot of people in Indonesia are worried once we've opened up our borders, it means we have to compete, we have to raise standards, jobs will be lost to other countries. How worried should we be, particularly when we see that the global economic situation is not that good and other countries are perhaps better than us in terms of infrastructure, education, human resources?
I understand this fear, and I see it in other countries. I even see it in the US. There's a large part of the US population which believe that opening trade may not be good for the US economy. No, that's not what the numbers say. That's not what experience says. This is not what economic history says. If you take the economic history of the world for the last 50 years and you look at countries that have opened and countries that have not opened, countries that have opened have been doing 2 or 3 times better than countries that have not opened. Starting, by the way, with China, which the growth of which started when Deng Xiaoping decided to open and liberalize the Chinese system. And the numbers are absolutely clear on this.
So we should not fear greater liberalization. We should not fear the opening of our borders.
I don't think so, again, because the experience shows it has worked. Now, has it worked as well for every country? No. A large part of whether it works extremely well or a bit less well has to do with domestic policies. Has to do with, again, infrastructures, education, the rule of law, the court system, corruption, which are many elements which you have to put together.
Yes,
and when all these elements are there, then it works incredibly well.
Which, unfortunately, Indonesia has not made much progress in some, for example, corruption is still very much a problem in this country, and the cost of doing business, cost for getting licenses for businesses to open up is actually very, very complicated.
That's part of what can be and should be improved, and this is low-cost investment. It's not like having to build an integrated chemical industry or reforming agricultural production or building a whole set of automobile industry. This is about regulation. This is about administrative manipulation of data and authorization. So in many ways, it's light to get rid of that, and then you can free a lot of business initiatives.
Indonesia was the only G20 member to record economic growth during the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Indonesia's export reached its all-time high in August 2011, with over $18 billion worth of goods from major exports such as oil and gas, mineral fuels and oils, electrical equipment and machinery. However, as demand from China and Europe has fallen for over a year, Indonesia is now facing a trade deficit. Export to China is down, while import from China has increased. This will no doubt impact Indonesia's economic health in the long run.
Now, putting it into some more global perspective, and we're talking about export normally we think of export being a good thing because it brings money into the country, into the economy. But what we're seeing now is actually people are importing less because of the crisis. Now, what would you see as the biggest obstacle to global trade at the moment, especially given this global economic downturn where countries are particularly averse perhaps to spending their money on imports?
Right. First, the macroeconomic situation on this planet is not good and will not improve, in my view, anytime soon. So we have to brace for years of slower growth than in the past. Growth will be higher in developing countries than in developed countries, but overall, okay. So there is not enough demand in the world economy for the moment. And that will impact everybody, even if, given the dynamism of the Asian economy, Indonesia is in the region in this planet who will be doing better than others in relative terms. But in absolute terms, Indonesia, like others, will have to cope with a slower foreign and, as a consequence of this, domestic growth. Now, on the trade side, I think we have to move from this old mindset that exports are great and imports are terrible, which is the old mercantilist mindset. If you look at how international trade works today, the countries that export the most are the countries that import the most.
Like China, for example.
China, Germany, to take big exporting countries. So in the past, export were good, import were bad. We now are in a world where, because exports are good, imports are good. The import content of exports has grown from an average worldwide of 20% 20 years ago to 40% now. 20 years from now, it's probably going to be 60%. Now, the moment what you export is 60% imported, 40% domestic value addition, shooting on your imports for protectionist reasons makes absolutely no sense.
No sense to just completely focus more on, say, the domestic market.
You have, I mean, a country like Indonesia
we have a big market,
blessed with a huge domestic market. Now, we all know that for a variety of reasons, you need an export component. But the right question is not whether your export cover your imports the old way. The right question is, in order to maximize my export potential, how much do I need to import? How much parts, components, basic elements do I need to import in order for my workforce to add value to what I import and then re-export it? And that's the major problem for the future.
Yeah, which means that we need to choose carefully our trading partners then. Because sometimes we compete with our neighboring countries because they're exporting the same thing as we are.
Yeah, but there is, the experience shows that with the diversification of production, with middle class growing on this planet, the sophistication of what they buy allows room for everybody. Countries do not specialize anymore in steel or chemistry or cars. They specialize in a segment of that. They specialize in luxury cars. They specialize in SUVs. They specialized in low-cost cars. So the sophistication of the consumer needs creates a much wider spectrum where competition leaves room for everybody. It's not a zero-sum game. No, if trade was a zero-sum game, the world would be at Stone Age.